The salt spray lashed across Captain Lyra's face, each droplet a stinging reminder of the sea's fury. Her ship, the Star Chaser, a vessel as defiant and spirited as its captain, groaned under the assault of a tempest that had clawed its way out of a deceptively calm horizon. Thunder, a primal roar from the heavens, split the bruised twilight sky, and the rain fell in punishing sheets, blurring the world into a maelstrom of gray and black. "Hold fast, lads," Lyra bellowed, her voice, though strained, cutting through the cacophony. Her dark hair, usually tied back in a practical braid, was plastered to her temples, and her regal blue coat, a defiant nod to the royal life she'd forsaken, was soaked through. But her eyes, the color of a stormy sea themselves, blazed with an unyielding fire. She gripped the ship's wheel, her knuckles white, fighting the ocean's relentless bid to claim them. This was not the life her father, King Thuron of Eldoria, had envisioned for his only daughter. He dreamt of statecraft, of silk gowns and strategic alliances sealed with marriage. Lyra had dreamt of horizons, of forgotten legends, and of the one true legacy her seafaring grandmother had whispered of, the Tidestone, an artifact of immense power said to control the very currents of the ocean, lost centuries ago. Her family called it a fool's errand, a childish fantasy. Lyra called it her birthright, her escape. She traded her crown for a cutlass, her palace for the creaking deck of the Star Chaser, and her title of princess for captain. All to find a treasure that was more than just riches. It was the key, she believed, to restoring a balance her kingdom had long forgotten, a balance her ancestors had once protected. The crudely drawn, yet magically imbued map her first mate, Finn, now clutched with white-knuckled desperation inside the relative dryness of his oilskins, was their only guide, a relic passed down, hinting at an island uncharted, shrouded in mists and myth. They had been close, so close. The very air had thrummed with an ancient energy as they'd neared the coordinates. And then, the storm. A colossal wave, a moving mountain of water, reared up before them. Lyra screamed a warning, spinning the wheel with all her might, but the Star Chaser was a toy in the face of such elemental rage. The wave crashed down, a deafening, world-shattering impact. Timber splintered, masts snapped like twigs, and the cries of her crew were swallowed by the storm's insatiable hunger. Lyra felt herself thrown, the wheel ripped from her grasp. Cold, churning water enveloped her, stealing her breath, dragging her down into its suffocating embrace. She fought, her limbs flailing, the survival instincts of a seasoned mariner warring with the crushing pressure. Debris struck her head, a blinding flash of pain, and then only darkness. Consciousness returned slowly, painfully, like a reluctant tide. Lyra coughed, expelling saltwater that burned her throat. A dull ache throbbed in her skull. She lay on something soft yet firm, sand, fine and white as crushed pearls. The roar of the storm had faded, replaced by the gentle lapping of waves and the distant cry of unfamiliar seabirds. She pushed herself up, wincing. Her vision swam, then cleared. Before her stretched a pristine beach, fringed by a jungle so lush and vibrant it seemed to hum with an unseen life. Towering trees with iridescent leaves reached towards a sky now a soft, forgiving blue. Flowers bloomed in impossible colors, their fragrance heavy and sweet in the humid air. It was beautiful, unnervingly so, untouched, and utterly alien. Of the Star Chaser there was no sign. Of her crew, no call. A cold dread seeped into her bones, more chilling than the lingering dampness of her clothes. "Finn," she called out, her voice raspy. "Marco, anyone." Only the echo of her own voice answered, swallowed by the dense foliage. She was alone, shipwrecked, on an island that felt as though it had risen from a dream or perhaps a nightmare. Gritting her teeth against the pain, Lyra forced herself to her feet. Survival first, assessment later. She needed water, shelter, and to find out if any of her crew had made it. Her cutlass was gone, lost to the waves, but a small dirk, always strapped to her boot, remained. She drew it, the familiar weight a small comfort in this disorienting new world. As she took her first tentative steps towards the tree line, a shadow detached itself from the deeper gloom beneath the canopy. It moved with a silence and grace that was not human. Lyra froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. The figure stepped into a patch of dappled sunlight and her breath hitched. He was tall, powerfully built, his skin the color of burnished bronze, shimmering with an almost imperceptible pattern of scales that caught the light like 1,000 tiny jewels. His hair, a cascade of a deep oceanic teal, flowed around broad shoulders, adorned with intricately woven shells and pearls that seemed to glow with an inner luminescence. But it was his eyes that captured hers, a startling, piercing aquamarine, ancient and wise, yet filled with an immediate, sharp suspicion. He wore little, save for a kilt-like garment fashioned from what looked like woven seaweed and leather, and bands of coral and gold adorned his arms. And below his waist, where legs should have been, was the powerful, sinuous tail of a fish, its scales a mesmerizing gradient of blues and greens, culminating in a fluke that fanned out, lightly disturbing the sand. A merman, the myths were true. He regarded her not as a survivor in need of rescue, but as an invader, a trespasser. His expression was hard, unyielding, his stance that of a guardian ready to defend his domain. In one hand he held a trident, its prongs fashioned from sharpened obsidian that looked lethally effective. Lyra, despite the shock that rendered her momentarily speechless, straightened her spine. She was a captain, a princess, even if a renegade one, she would not cower. What are you?" she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. The merman's eyes narrowed. He made no sound for a long moment, simply studying her, his gaze so intense it felt as though he could see into her very soul. Then he spoke, his voice a low rumble like the distant surge of the deep ocean, surprisingly understandable, though accented with an unfamiliar cadence. "You are the trespasser," he stated, his aquamarine eyes never leaving hers. "This is Kaelan's isle, my isle, and you are not welcome here." His trident lifted a fraction, a clear, unambiguous threat. Lyra knew with a sinking certainty that her quest for the Tidestone had just taken a far more dangerous and far more complicated turn. She was no longer just shipwrecked, she was, it seemed, a prisoner. Lyra's chin jutted out, a spark of defiance igniting in her sea-storm eyes despite the throbbing in her head and the precariousness of her situation. A prisoner she might be, but a compliant one she would never be. "Not welcome," she retorted, her voice gaining strength. "My ship was destroyed, my crew scattered by a storm that seemed conjured from spite itself. I am a survivor, not a willing guest to be dismissed so easily. And what of my crew? Are they also not welcome on your precious isle?" Kaelan's aquamarine gaze remained as unyielding as the obsidian prongs of his trident. "The sea is often cruel to those who do not respect its boundaries." "Your kind," he said, the words laced with a deep, resonant disapproval that seemed to echo centuries of grievance, "rarely do. They come with their noise, their fire, their greed, leaving scars upon the waters and the land. This isle is a sanctuary, a heart beating with ancient life. It does not suffer intrusion gladly." He didn't directly answer her question about the crew, his silence a heavy implication that their fate was of little concern to him, or perhaps already sealed by the storm. Lyra's fists clenched. "My kind, you judge us all by the actions of a few. I am Captain Lyra of the Star Chaser, and I seek a lost legacy, not to plunder your sanctuary." Though a part of her, the pragmatic captain, couldn't help but catalog the island's strange beauty, the unique resources it might hold, even as the renegade princess in her felt a pang of sympathy for his fierce protectiveness. This place felt different, ancient, sacred. "Legacy," Kaelan repeated, the word a low rumble. His eyes flicked over her, taking in her tattered, once fine coat, the dirk still clutched in her hand, the inherent authority in her stance that no shipwreck could entirely wash away. "All surface dwellers seek something. Usually it is something that does not belong to them." He gestured with his trident, not menacingly this time, but with an undeniable command. "Come, you cannot remain here, the shore is too exposed." Lyra bristled. "And where, pray tell, are you taking me? To some damp merman dungeon?" A flicker of something unreadable crossed his features, annoyance, or perhaps the faintest hint of amusement at her audacity. "There are no dungeons on Ethel, only a reckoning for those who disturb its balance." He began to move not towards the water she might have expected, but inland, his powerful tail propelling him over the sand with surprising agility, leaving a broad serpentine track. He moved with the fluid grace of a creature perfectly attuned to its environment, whether sand or sea. Left with little choice, for to remain alone and injured was a far greater risk, Lyra followed, her dirk held ready, her senses on high alert. The air grew heavier as they entered the jungle, the canopy so dense that sunlight became a filtered emerald glow. Strange, melodious bird calls echoed around them, and the scent of unknown blossoms and damp earth filled her lungs. The plants themselves were extraordinary, vines that pulsed with a soft, internal light, flowers that seemed to track her movements, and trees whose bark shimmered with metallic hues. Lyra, a seasoned traveler who had seen many strange ports, had never encountered a place so vibrantly, almost aggressively alive. Kaelan led her along a barely discernible path, his movements sure and silent. He didn't look back, yet Lyra felt his awareness of her, a constant, prickling presence. She tried to commit the route to memory, noting landmarks, a curiously shaped rock outcrop, a stream that glittered as if filled with liquid moonlight, a colossal tree whose roots formed a natural archway. Escape was paramount in her thoughts, but so was the Tidestone. If this island was so ancient, so potent with magic, could it be the place her grandmother's map had indicated? After what felt like an hour, though time seemed to warp in this enchanted place, they reached a secluded cove. A waterfall cascaded down a sheer cliff face, its waters an impossible shade of turquoise, plunging into a crystal-clear lagoon. Behind the waterfall, artfully concealed, was the entrance to a cave. "You will stay here," Kaelan announced, his voice echoing slightly in the enclosed space. "It is sheltered, there is fresh water," he gestured towards the lagoon, "and food if you know how to find it." His eyes held a challenge. The cave was surprisingly dry and airy, the sound of the waterfall a constant, soothing murmur. A soft, phosphorescent moss grew on some of Peath's walls, casting a gentle, ethereal light. It wasn't a dungeon, but it was undeniably a prison, however picturesque. "And what if I choose not to stay?" Lyra challenged, testing him. Kaelan turned, his form silhouetted against the bright opening of the cave. "The jungle has many guardians, surface dweller. Not all are as restrained as I, and the sea surrounding Ethel does not easily yield what it claims." The implication was clear. Leaving the designated area would be perilous, if not fatal. He paused, his gaze lingering on her for a moment longer. "Rest, recover. We will speak again when the sun is high tomorrow. I will know if you attempt to leave the cove." With that, he turned and with a powerful surge of his tail dove into the lagoon, disappearing beneath its shimmering surface without a ripple. Lyra watched him go, a mixture of frustration, fear, and an unwilling spark of fascination churning within her. Kaelan, he was an enigma, a creature of myth made real, a guardian of a land that defied all her known charts and experiences. He was also her captor. Left alone, the weight of her situation crashed down on her. Her crew, her ship, her quest, all were in jeopardy. She sank onto a smooth, cool rock inside the cave, the dirk falling her head ached, her body was bruised, but her spirit, though battered, was not broken. She thought of the Tidestone, the whispers of its power. Her grandmother had spoken of guardians, of an island hidden from the greedy eyes of the world. Could Kaelan be one such guardian, and this island, Ethel as he called it, could it truly be the resting place of the artifact she sought? If so, her shipwreck might have been a disastrous stroke of luck, leading her directly to her goal, albeit into the hands of a formidable and hostile protector. As twilight deepened outside the cave, painting the waterfall in hues of violet and indigo, Lyra began to assess her surroundings more closely. The moss on the walls, she realized, pulsed with a very faint rhythm like a slow heartbeat. The water in the lagoon, when she cupped it in her hands, felt strangely invigorating, clearing some off the fog from her mind. This island was alive with a magic she had only read about in forbidden texts. A sudden rustling sound from the jungle's edge made her jump to her feet, dirk raised. But it was only a small, brightly plumed bird. It sang a complex melody that seemed to soothe rather than alarm. She lowered her weapon, a sigh escaping her lips. She needed to be smarter than this, more resourceful. Kaelan had said there was food if she knew how to find it. That was a challenge she, a pirate captain who had survived far worse than a luxurious cave, was willing to accept. She would rest, yes, she would recover, but she would also observe, learn, and she would find a way to either win Kaelan's trust or circumvent his authority. The Tidestone was too important, and Captain Lyra was not one to be deterred by a stern merman and his enchanted isle, no matter how imposing he or it might be. Her first priority, however, was to find any sign of Finn or the others. Her heart ached for them. As the moon cast its silver light through the cascading water, Lyra found her gaze drawn to the entrance of the cave. Kaelan was out there, a part of this island, a part of its mystery. He was an obstacle, certainly, but the way his eyes, ancient and knowing, had assessed her, the way he spoke of the island's sanctity. There was a depth to him, a profound connection to this place that resonated with a part of her she rarely acknowledged. The princess who had once loved the ancient tales, the girl who had believed in magic before the cynicism of her father's court had tried to crush it. Perhaps, she mused, her captor held more secrets than just those of his isle. And perhaps, just perhaps, their unexpected, unwelcome meeting was not merely a matter of chance, but of a destiny far older and more complex than either of them could yet comprehend. The thought sent an unfamiliar shiver down her spine, one that had nothing to do with the cool night air. The first rays of dawn painted the cascading waterfall with strokes of rose and gold when Lyra finally stirred from a restless sleep. The rhythmic hum of the island, a subtle vibration she felt more than heard, had been a strange lullaby. Her body ached, a testament to the shipwreck and her uncomfortable bed of sand and leaves, but her mind was sharp, her resolve hardened. She would not be a damsel in distress, waiting for her captor's judgment. With the practiced efficiency of a captain accustomed to making the most of meager resources, she began her day. The lagoon's water, cool and invigorating, washed away the grime of the previous day. Her dirk, though small, was sharp. She scanned the lush foliage at the cove's edge, her eyes trained to spot the slightest anomaly on the open sea, now searching for sustenance. Kaelan's challenge, food, if you know how to find it, echoed in her mind. She recognized a few hardy fruit-bearing bushes similar to those found on some tropical isles she'd visited, small tart berries that stained her fingers purple, and a larger melon-like fruit with a tough rind that yielded sweet, watery flesh. It wasn't a feast, but it was enough. It was survival. She even managed, with a piece of sharpened driftwood and some surprising patience, to spear a silvery fish that darted too close to the lagoon's edge, its scales shimmering like Kaelan's own. Cooking it was out of the question, but as a pirate she'd eaten worse. By the time the sun climbed high, casting brilliant spears of light through the jungle canopy and turning the lagoon into a pool of liquid turquoise, Lyra had explored every accessible inch of her confined domain. She'd found nothing of her crew, no wreckage from the Star Chaser. The cove was a perfect, inescapable bowl, the cliffs too sheer to climb, the jungle too dense and foreboding to penetrate without a guide or more substantial tools. True to his word, Kaelan emerged from the lagoon as the sun reached its zenith. He moved with the same silent, fluid grace, his powerful tail propelling him onto a sun-warmed rock at the water's edge. His aquamarine eyes scanned the cove, noting the discarded fruit rinds, the remnants of her meager meal, and her slightly more composed, if still wary, demeanor. He carried nothing today, not even his trident, yet his presence was no less commanding. "You are resourceful," he observed, his voice a low baritone that seemed to vibrate in the humid air. It wasn't a compliment, merely a statement of fact. Lyra met his gaze directly, wiping her hands on her torn trousers. "I am a survivor, and I am still waiting for answers. My crew, what has become of them? Did any others wash ashore?" Kaelan's expression remained impassive. The sea is vast, and Ethel's currents are treacherous to the unwary. What the storm claims, it rarely returns willingly. I have seen no others. A knot tightened in Lyra's chest. Finn, young Marco, her loyal men, she pushed the grief down. She couldn't afford to break, not here. Then I am truly alone with you, it seems. "You are on Ethel," he corrected, "and Ethel is never empty. It is alive and it watches." "And what does Ethel and its guardian intend to do with me?" Lyra pressed, stepping closer to the lagoon's edge, though maintaining a cautious distance. "You said we would speak." "We will," Kaelan agreed. He tilted his head, studying her with that unnerving intensity. "You said you seek a lost legacy. What is this legacy that drives a princess of the surface world to abandon her station and brave such storms?" Lyra hesitated. Revealing the true nature of the Tidestone to this enigmatic merman felt like laying her most valuable card on the table. But what choice did she have? Defiance had gotten her nowhere but a picturesque prison. Perhaps a sliver of truth might pry open a door. "It is called the Tidestone," she began, her voice low and earnest. "An artifact of my ancestors, said to possess a great power, a connection to the very heart of the ocean. It was lost long ago, but my grandmother believed it was more than legend. She left me a chart, a whisper of its location, an island hidden from the world, a place of ancient magic." She watched his face for any flicker of recognition, any sign that the name or the description meant something to him. Kaelan's expression didn't change, yet Lyra sensed a subtle shift in the air around him, a stillness that was almost more telling than an outright reaction. His aquamarine eyes seemed to deepen, to hold an ancient sorrow. "The heart of the ocean," he murmured, the words almost a sigh. "So that is what your people call it now." He looked away from her, out towards the thundering waterfall, his gaze distant. "Many have sought it over the ages, men of greed, sorcerers hungry for power, kings who wish to command what cannot be commanded." His eyes returned to hers, colder now. They brought only ruin in their wake. "I am not them," Lyra insisted, a flare of her old fire returning. "I don't seek to command or to hoard its power. My grandmother spoke of it as a source of balance, a way to heal the rifts between the land and the sea, to restore what has been broken by the kind of greed you speak of. My kingdom, Eldoria, has forgotten its connection to the ocean. The Tidestone is meant to remind us." Kaelan was silent for a long moment, his gaze searching hers. "Noble words, Princess Captain, but words are wind, actions define intent." He pushed himself off the rock, sliding back into the water until he was waist-deep, his powerful tail fins brushing the sandy bottom. "You wish to understand Ethel, to understand what it is you truly seek, then come. See with your own eyes why this place is guarded, why your legacy is not a treasure to be claimed, but a responsibility to be revered or a terror to be unleashed." He turned and began to swim towards the thundering curtain of the waterfall. Lyra stared after him, her mind racing. Was this a trick, another test, or a genuine offer to understand? The primal fear of the unknown warred with the insatiable curiosity that had always been her driving force, the same curiosity that had led her here. "Where are you going?" she called out. He paused at the edge of the waterfall, the spray misting around him, making his form shimmer. "To the heart of Ethel, if you dare." Without waiting for her reply, he slipped behind the cascade of water and vanished. Lyra stood frozen, the roar of the waterfall filling her ears. The heart of Ethel. The words resonated with what her grandmother had called the Tidestone. Could they be one and the same? And what dangers lay beyond that watery veil in the island's hidden depths? She looked at her small dirk, then at the impenetrable jungle surrounding her cove. Staying here meant a slow, uncertain fate. Following him meant stepping into the complete unknown, into the domain of a creature whose power and motives were still a mystery. But Captain Lyra had not abandoned a kingdom to play it safe. With a deep breath, her heart pounding a rhythm of fear and exhilaration, She plunged into the cool water of the lagoon and swam towards the waterfall, towards the enigmatic merman and the secrets he guarded. The force of the falling water was immense, a battering ram against her senses, but she pushed through, her eyes straining to see in the dim light, until she too passed behind the shimmering curtain. The moment Lyra passed through the roaring curtain of the waterfall, the world transformed. The deafening sound of cascading water muted into a resonant hum, a vibration that seemed to thrum deep within her bones. She found herself in a wide, slick stone passage, illuminated by the turquoise light filtering through the watery veil behind her, and by veins of glowing moss that snaked across the tunnel walls like constellations in a subterranean sky. The air was cool and damp, heavy with the scent of wet stone, unknown minerals, and an ozone-like tang of raw, untamed energy. Kaelan waited for her just beyond the curtain, his form shimmering in the ethereal light, his aquamarine eyes fixed on hers, watching her reaction. He offered no hand, no word of encouragement, simply an expectant silence. "Lead on then, Guardian," Lyra said, her voice impressively steady despite the tremor of awe and a healthy dose of apprehension that coursed through her. She would not let him see her falter. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod and turned, his powerful tail propelling him smoothly down the gently sloping passage. Lyra followed, her hand instinctively going to the hilt of her dirk, though she knew it would be of little use against whatever magic this place or its guardian might wield. The tunnel twisted and turned, sometimes narrowing so that she had to walk sideways, sometimes opening into small grottos where water dripped from stalactites, each drop echoing like a musical note in the profound silence. The glowing moss became more prevalent, its light soft and inviting, yet the shadows it cast danced with an unnerving life of their own. Lyra noticed strange carvings on the walls, ancient, swirling patterns interspersed with depictions of creatures she couldn't name, great-scaled beasts, beings of pure light, and figures that were half human, half oceanic. They were stories, she realized, an ancient history etched into the very bones of the island. Kaelan moved with a reverence she found striking. He did not speak, but occasionally he would pause, his hand lightly touching a particular carving or a cluster of glowing crystals, a silent communion that spoke volumes of his connection to this hidden world. Lyra, in turn, found her brash pirate captain persona receding, replaced by a quieter, more observant self, the part of her that had always been drawn to the mysteries her grandmother's tales had hinted at. After what felt like an eternity, yet perhaps was only a short while in this timeless place, the passage began to widen, the air growing warmer, and the distant hum intensified into a palpable throb of energy. Light, brighter and more vibrant than the moss glow, spilled from around a final bend. Kaelan paused at the threshold, turning to Lyra. "What you are about to witness, surface dweller, has been seen by fewer than a dozen of your kind in 1,000 years. Most who sought it brought only darkness. Open your heart, not just your eyes, if you wish to understand." His words, cryptic and solemn, sent a shiver down her spine. She nodded, her throat suddenly dry. He stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. Lyra took a breath and rounded the bend. The sight that greeted her stole the air from her lungs. They stood on a wide ledge overlooking a colossal cavern, so vast it seemed to be a world unto itself. There was no ceiling visible, only a swirling opalescent mist far above that pulsed with shifting colors like a captive aurora borealis. The source of the cavern's light was not singular, but manifold giant crystals, easily the height of the Star Chaser's mainmast, jutted from the cavern floor and walls, each one radiating an intense, pure light in hues of sapphire, emerald, and amethyst. Bioluminescent flora draped every surface, their delicate tendrils and glowing blossoms creating an ethereal garden. Waterfalls, smaller than the one they'd passed, cascaded down crystalline cliffs into pools of water so clear they seemed like polished glass. The air itself thrummed with power, a clean, invigorating energy that made every nerve in Lyra's body tingle. And in the very center of the cavern, upon a raised dais of what looked like black, volcanic rock, pulsed the source of it all. It was not a stone, not as she had imagined. It was a sphere of living light, perhaps 10 feet in diameter, constantly shifting, swirling with the colors of the deepest ocean and the brightest stars. It was like looking into the heart of a newborn galaxy. Tendrils of energy, fine as spun moonlight, reached out from it, connecting to the giant crystals, to the very rock of the cavern, making the entire space feel like a single, breathing organism. It was undeniably beautiful, overwhelmingly powerful, and terrifying in its raw, untamed majesty. "The Tidestone," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible above the resonant thrum that filled the cavern, "the heart of the ocean." "It is the anima maris," Kaelan said, his voice filled with a profound reverence that resonated with the energy of the place. He had moved to stand beside her on the ledge, his gaze fixed on the pulsing sphere. The soul of the sea, not a treasure to be owned, Captain, but the very lifeblood of Ethel and the regulator of the deep ocean currents that shape your world and mine. It maintains the balance. It is the balance. He swept a hand towards the sphere. For millennia, my people of the Kaelri were its chosen guardians. We understood its rhythms, its needs. We drew from its energy to protect this sanctuary, to nurture the life it sustained, and to keep its existence a secret from those who would exploit it. His face darkened. But your kind surface dwellers, they are relentless. They discovered whispers of its power. Some came seeking knowledge, but most came seeking dominion. They tried to steal fragments of its light, to bind its energy to their will. He led her carefully down a gently sloping path that wound its way towards the cavern floor. As they drew closer to the anima maris, Lyra could feel its power more intensely, a warm, vibrant pressure against her skin, a song in her blood. It felt familiar, like a forgotten melody her soul recognized. What happened to them? Lyra asked, her gaze still transfixed by the swirling light. To those who tried to take it. Kaelan stopped before a series of smaller, darker crystals near the edge of the central dais. Within them, Lyra could see a faint, trapped luminescence, like dying embers. The anima maris defends itself. Its power is life, but to those who approach with greed and violence in their hearts, it offers only oblivion or a fate worse. Their spirits are absorbed, their ambitions turn to dust, their life force becoming a faint, sorrowful echo within the lesser stones, a warning to others. Lyra felt a chill despite the warmth radiating from the great sphere. The beautiful, terrible power of it was undeniable. Her grandmother had spoken of balance, of healing. She had never spoken of this. You see now, Princess Captain? Kaelan's voice was low, almost gentle, but with an undercurrent of steel. This is not a trinket for a king's treasury, nor a weapon to be wielded. To disturb its harmony is to invite catastrophe, not just for this island, but for the currents, the tides, the very life of the oceans your people depend upon. Lyra looked from the trapped lights in the dark crystals to the vibrant, life-giving pulse of the anima maris. The sheer scale of what she was witnessing, the responsibility it represented, was staggering. Her quest, which had begun as a defiant search for a family legacy, a personal adventure, now felt impossibly vast, freighted with a weight she had never conceived. My grandmother, Lyra began, then faltered. She believed it could heal. She spoke of a time when your people and mine understood each other, when the anima maris was a bridge, not a fortress. Kaelan's expression softened, a rare and fleeting occurrence. There are such legends, yes, from a time before the Great Betrayal when a surface king offered knowledge, chose instead to attempt theft. Since then, the Kaelri have guarded it in isolation. I am the last of that line tasked with its direct protection here. The last, the word hung in the air, heavy with loneliness and the burden of an age-old duty. Lyra suddenly understood the fierce, almost desperate protectiveness in his eyes, the weariness that sometimes shadowed his stern features. He was not just a guardian, he was a solitary sentinel, holding back the tide of the world's greed from the very soul of his ocean. As if sensing her shift in understanding, the anima maris pulsed, a wave of warm, golden light washing over them. Lyra gasped as images, fleeting and vivid, filled her mind. Ancient cities beneath the waves, majestic Kaelri with tales like spun moonlight, surface ships sailing in harmony with great sea creatures, and then fire, betrayal, the sorrow of a dying ocean spirit. It was a torrent of emotion, of history, of profound loss. When the visions faded, she found herself breathless, Kaelan's hand steadying her arm, his touch surprisingly warm. His aquamarine eyes searched hers, questioning. It showed me, she stammered. It shows what it wishes to whom it wishes, Kaelan said, withdrawing his hand, though his gaze remained locked with hers. It has not shown such things to a surface dweller in longer than memory. Before Lyra could process this, a low, dissonant hum echoed through the cavern, disrupting the harmonious thrum of the anima maris. The great sphere flickered, its light dimming for a terrifying instant before flaring back, but with an agitated, unstable quality. The crystals around them resonated with the discord. Kaelan tensed, his head snapping up, his entire demeanor shifting from solemn guardian to alert warrior. What is that? Lyra asked, alarmed. They are close, Kaelan hissed, his eyes blazing with a cold fury. Others have found Ethel, and they are already poisoning its heart with their avarice. The dissonant hum intensified, a sickening counterpoint to the anima maris' steady pulse. The great sphere of light flickered again, more erratically this time, and a tremor ran through the cavern floor, dislodging a shower of glowing dust from the crystalline ceiling. Lyra stumbled, her hand flying out to steady herself against a cool, smooth crystal pillar. Kaelan was a statue of barely contained fury, his powerful body coiled like a sea serpent ready to strike. His aquamarine eyes, fixed on some point beyond the cavern walls, blazed with a chilling light. "They defile the outer sanctums," he snarled, his voice a dangerous undercurrent. "Their clumsy magic, their crude tools, they are like insects gnawing at the roots of the world tree." "Who are they?" Lyra demanded, her own alarm bells ringing. The visions the anima maris had shown her, the betrayal, the ruin, felt suddenly, terribly present. Other seekers. Seekers of power, yes, but without understanding, without respect, Kaelan corrected, turning his burning gaze to her. "They feel the anima maris energy, but they cannot comprehend its nature. They will try to cage it, to drain it, to shatter it for their petty ambitions." He looked at her then, a challenge in his eyes. "You have seen its truth, surface dweller. You felt its history. Are your pretty words of balance and healing merely wind, or do they have substance?" Lyra met his gaze without flinching, her own resolve crystallizing. The captain who had sought a legendary treasure was still within her, but the princess who had glimpsed the sacred heart of the ocean, the woman who had felt the island's ancient sorrow, was now ascendant. "I told you, Guardian, I am not them. If Ethel is threatened, if the anima maris is in danger, then I will defend it. Show me what to do." A flicker of surprise, quickly masked, crossed Kaelan's features. He had expected defiance, perhaps, or a self-serving offer to bargain. This unhesitating declaration of alliance was unexpected. "Your courage is undeniable, Lyra of Eldoria," he conceded, using her full title for the first time, the sound of it strange and formal in this mystical place. "Even if your wisdom is yet unproven." He gave a curt nod. "Come, we must see the extent of the desecration, and you. You may know these invaders or their methods." He led the way, not back through the tunnel they had entered, but towards a narrower, steeper passage that spiraled upwards, deeper into the island's hidden structure. The climb was arduous, the air growing colder, the only light now coming from the faint glow of Kaelan's own form and the occasional luminescent fungi clinging to the rock. As they ascended, Kaelan spoke in low, clipped tones. "The anima maris is connected to a network of energy conduits that run throughout Ethel like a great heart in its veins. If these conduits are damaged, or if profane magic is used near them, the heart suffers, its rhythm falters." "And these intruders know of these conduits?" Lyra asked, pulling herself up over a rocky ledge. "They are not fools, merely barbarians," Kaelan replied. "They would have ancient charts, perhaps incomplete, perhaps corrupted, much like your own. They would seek places where the island's energy is most concentrated, easiest to tap into or to break." They emerged onto a windswept clifftop, high above the turbulent sea on the far side of the island. The storm that had wrecked the Star Chaser had passed, but the ocean here was a churning cauldron of dark waves crashing against jagged black rocks, and anchored precariously in a narrow, treacherous inlet below was a ship. Lyra's breath caught. It was not one of hers. This vessel was sleek and black, its sails the color of a starless night, bearing the sigil of a coiled kraken clutching a human skull, the infamous ensign of Captain Vorlag, a ruthless pirate known throughout the southern archipelago for his cruelty and his unnatural obsession with dark artifacts. "Vorlag," Lyra breathed, her hand tightening on her dirk. "I know him. He deals in whispers of forbidden magic, plunders sacred sites. He would not hesitate to destroy this entire island if he thought it held something he could exploit." A cold dread filled her. If Vorlag was here, her quest for the Tidestone had attracted far more dangerous attention than she had ever anticipated. And her crew, if they had survived the storm, they could very well be his prisoners. Kaelan's eyes narrowed at the ship. "His vessel bleeds a dark energy into the water. It sickens the currents." He pointed towards a nearby fissure in the cliff face from which a faint, acrid smoke now curled, "and his men are already at their destructive work. They are attempting to force an entry into one of the primary conduits." "We have to stop them," Lyra said, her mind racing, already assessing the situation with a captain's eye. "How many men does Vorlag usually sail with? What are their tactics?" "Their numbers are irrelevant if they breach the conduit," Kaelan stated, his gaze fixed on the fissure. "The feedback to the anima maris could be catastrophic. We must seal the entry they are trying to create and drive them from that sacred space." "Seal it how?" Lyra asked. "And drive them out sounds simple, but Vorlag's crew are cutthroats. They won't leave willingly." Kaelan looked at her, a new intensity in his eyes. "Ethel has its own defenses, its own guardians, though they slumber deep. But waking them takes time, a great expenditure of the anima maris energy, which it can ill afford now. We are its first line of defense." He paused. I can seal the rock, redirect some of the island's energy to reinforce it, but I will need a distraction. I will need time. Your knowledge of these pirates, how would they react to a direct assault from a single merman? Lyra considered. They'd be surprised, certainly, likely terrified at first, but Vorlag is cunning. He'd rally them. They'd see you as a prize, a mythical creature to be captured or killed. She shook her head. A direct assault by you alone is too risky. They overwhelm you with numbers, no matter how powerful you are. And you, Princess Captain, what do you propose? The question was not sarcastic. There was a genuine seeking in his tone. He was, she realized with a jolt, actually asking for her strategic input. A plan desperate and dangerous began to form in her mind. Vorlag is arrogant. He underestimates his foes, and he's greedy. We use that. You create a diversion, yes, but not a direct attack. Something to draw the bulk of his men away from that fisher. Something that looks like a greater prize or a greater threat elsewhere on the shore. While they are occupied, you and I, under cover of that confusion, can get to the conduit. You seal it. I will deal with any who remain. Kaelan studied her, his expression thoughtful. A merman and a shipwrecked pirate princess against a crew of seasoned marauders. The odds are not in our favor. Perhaps not, Lyra agreed, a grim smile touching her lips. But they don't know about you, and they certainly don't know what I'm capable of when my back is against the wall. She met his gaze, her own reflecting the stormy sea. Besides, Guardian, it seems we are the only hope this island and its heart currently has. Are you with me? For a long moment, Kaelan simply looked at her, the ancient wisdom in his eyes weighing her words, her spirit. Then a slow, almost imperceptible nod. The anima Mari showed you visions for a reason, Lyra of Eldoria. Perhaps it saw a warrior, not just a princess. Very well, we will try your desperate plan. But know this, if we fail, Ethel itself may choose to unleash a power that will consume us all, invader and guardian alike, to protect its heart. The warning hung heavy in the air, but Lyra felt a surge of adrenaline. This was a battle she understood, a fight for survival, for something sacred. And for the first time since washing ashore on this impossible island, she felt not like a prisoner but like a captain with a purpose, allied however improbably with its formidable, enigmatic protector. The fate of Ethel, and perhaps much more, rested on their fragile, newfound accord. The wind whipped Lyra's hair across her face as she crouched beside Kaelan on the clifftop, the churning sea a hungry beast below. Vorlag's ship, the Kraken's Kiss, looked like a venomous insect clinging to the island's flank. Smoke still curled from the fissure where his men were attempting their sacrilege. Vorlag's greed is his weakness, Lyra explained, her voice low and urgent, her mind already sifting through pirate tactics. He'll have most of his men focused on that conduit, believing it's the direct path to power, but he always keeps a keen eye out for easier, richer pickings. We need to make him think he's found one. She pointed to a small, treacherous-looking cove further down the coast, visible from the Kraken's Kiss but difficult to access quickly from the fisher site. That cove is riddled with caves at high tide, some appearing to go deep into the cliffs. If we could create a significant light source there, something that mimics the glow of immense treasure or even the anima Mari's itself, he wouldn't be able to resist sending a large party to investigate. Kaelan's brow furrowed. A false light, deception. The concept seemed alien to his direct, elemental nature. Deception is a tool, Guardian, like your trident, Lyra countered. Used wisely, it can save lives or, in this case, perhaps an island. Can you create such a light? Something potent enough to be seen from his ship, something that speaks of untold riches. He considered her, then the distant cove. The island's energy can be coaxed. There are crystal formations within those sea caves. If I focus a stream of Ethel's power towards them, they will resonate, amplifying the light into a beacon. It will be a strain, especially with the anima Mari's already disturbed, but it can be done. Good, Lyra nodded, a surge of grim determination flowing through her. While you work your coaxing, I'll make my way closer to the fisher. Once you see his men diverted, signal me. A bird call, something natural they won't question. Kaelan's lips thinned, the cry of the sea hawk, 3 times. He paused, his aquamarine eyes searching hers. This plan relies on their predictability and your swiftness, if either fails. Then we're both Kraken bait, Lyra finished with a wry twist of her lips. Let's not fail. With a shared nod, they separated. Kaelan, with a silent prayer to the deep currents, focused his will, his hands glowing faintly as he drew upon the island's intricate web of energy, coaxing it towards the distant sea caves. Lyra, meanwhile, began her perilous descent down the cliff face, using every handhold, every jutting root, moving with the practiced agility of a creature born to the rigging of a ship. The wind tugged at her, threatening to pluck her from the rock, but she pressed on, her gaze fixed on the fissure. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Lyra reached a precarious perch overlooking the area where Vorlag's men toiled. She could hear their gruff voices, the clang of metal against stone, and feel a sickening, discordant thrum emanating from the fissure, the island's pain. There were at least a dozen pirates there, armed to the teeth, supervised by a hulking brute with a jagged scar across his face whom she vaguely recognized as Vorlag's first mate, Grendel. Just as her nerves began to fray, a piercing cry echoed across the cliffs, the call of a sea hawk once, twice, 3 times. Lyra's head snapped up. Far below, she saw a brilliant, pulsating blue-green light suddenly erupt from the direction of the sea caves she'd indicated, a beacon of impossible wealth that cut through the gray afternoon. Almost immediately, she heard excited shouts from Vorlag's ship. Grendel barked orders. As Lyra had predicted, the lure of easy treasure was too strong. More than half the pirates at the fissure abandoned their work, scrambling back towards the inlet, presumably to launch boats and investigate the mysterious glow. Vorlag's greed had indeed made him predictable. "Now, Kaelan," Lyra whispered, hoping he could somehow sense her readiness. As if in answer, the ground beneath her trembled slightly. She saw Kaelan emerge from the churning surf near the base of the cliff below the fissure, his form a powerful silhouette against the crashing waves. He moved with astonishing speed towards the pirates who remained. Lyra didn't hesitate. She launched herself from her perch, using an overhanging vine to swing down into the midst of the surprised pirates guarding the fissure's entrance. She landed lightly, her dirk a flash of silver. "Looking for something, gentlemen?" she called out, her voice ringing with a confidence she didn't entirely feel. The remaining 5 pirates, startled by her sudden appearance, spun around. Before they could fully react, she was among them. Her dirk was not a dueling weapon, but in close quarters, wielded with her desperate speed and precision, it was deadly. She dodged a clumsy sword thrust, her blade darting out to slice across an exposed arm. Another pirate lunged, and she used his momentum to send him sprawling. Meanwhile, Kaelan had reached the fissure. He ignored the pirates attacking Lyra, his entire focus on the desecrated rock. His hands pressed against the stone, and a deep, resonant hum filled the air, the same thrum Lyra had felt in the heart of the cavern. The rock around the fissure began to glow with an intense blue light, seams of energy spreading like roots, knitting the stone back together, sealing the unnatural breach. One of the pirates, a burly man with a cruel grin, broke away from Lyra and charged Kaelan from behind, axe raised. "Kaelan, look out!" Lyra cried, disarming her current opponent with a swift kick. Kaelan didn't turn, but a shimmering shield of water, coalescing from the very air around him, sprang up behind him, deflecting the axe blow with a resounding clang. The pirate stumbled back, his eyes wide with disbelief. Lyra used the momentary distraction to press her advantage, felling another pirate with a precise strike. But Grendel, Vorlag's first mate, who had initially been drawn away by the false beacon, had apparently grown suspicious or been alerted by the sounds of fighting. He now charged back towards the fissure, a roar of fury on his lips, his massive frame blocking the narrow path. "Well, well, what have we here?" Grendel sneered, his eyes fixing on Lyra. "A half-drowned rat playing at hero, and what's this? A fishman? Vorlag will pay handsomely for such a specimen." He lunged at Lyra, his greatsword whistling through the air. Lyra dodged, but the sheer force of the blow forced her back. She was outmatched in strength, her small dirk barely adequate against his heavy blade. Just as Grendel raised his sword for another strike, a powerful torrent of water, seemingly conjured from nowhere, slammed into his side, sending him staggering. Kaelan, his work at the fissure apparently complete, had turned his attention to the fight. The conduit was sealed, the rock around it now smooth and unbroken, glowing faintly. "Your kind brings only discord," Kaelan said, his voice dangerously calm as he advanced on Grendel, water swirling around his hands like liquid weapons. Grendel, though soaked and surprised, was not easily intimidated. He roared and charged Kaelan. Lyra, seeing her chance, darted forward, her dirk aimed at a gap in Grendel's makeshift armor. The fight was brutal and chaotic. Lyra fought with desperate cunning, using her agility to evade Grendel's powerful blows while Kaelan assailed him with concentrated blasts of water and manipulated the very rock beneath their feet to trip and unbalance him. Finally, with a coordinated move, Lyra fainting low, Kaelan conjuring a sudden waterspout that knocked Grendel off balance, Lyra managed to plunge her dirk deep into the pirate's exposed thigh. Grendel howled in pain and fury, collapsing to one knee. Before either Lyra or Kaelan could press the advantage, a chilling voice cut through the air, sharp and cold as an Arctic wind. "Enough of this playtime, Grendel, you disappoint me." Captain Vorlag himself stood at the edge of the clifftop overlooking the fissure, flanked by a dozen more of his heavily armed crew. He was a tall, gaunt man with eyes like chips of ice and a cruel slash of a mouth. In his hand, he held a strange, pulsating orb of black crystal that seemed to drink the light around it. "It seems my little lure worked better than expected," Vorlag said, his icy gaze sweeping over Lyra and Kaelan, a predatory smile touching his lips. "Not only did it draw out the island's guardian, but also the runaway princess of Eldoria. Imagine my surprise. It seems your family is most eager for your return, Lyra, or at least for what you were seeking." His smile widened. "And I intend to collect the bounty on both." Lyra's heart sank. They were trapped, outnumbered, with Vorlag holding some kind of dark artifact. Kaelan stood beside her, his body tense, the water still swirling around him, but his expression was grim. The brief victory at the conduit felt hollow now, replaced by a far more immediate and deadly threat. Vorlag's icy pronouncement hung in the air, as chilling as the unnatural aura emanating from the black crystal orb he cradled. The dozen pirates flanking him fanned out, their weapons glinting menacingly, effectively cutting off any escape. Grendel, clutching his bleeding thigh, managed to snarl in grim satisfaction. "Indeed, Princess," Vorlag continued, his voice a silken threat. "Your uncle, Lord Valerius, sends his regards. He was most insistent that the family legacy you so brazenly pursued be returned to its rightful and more controllable hands. He even provided this charming little artifact to help persuade any uncooperative elements." He gestured with the orb towards Kaelan, and a wave of nauseating dark energy pulsed from it, making the merman hiss in pain, the water swirling around him momentarily faltering. The very air around Kaelan seemed to dim, his natural luminescence suppressed. Lyra's blood ran cold. Her uncle Valerius, her father's ambitious younger brother, a man she had always distrusted. He knew of the Tidestone, and this orb, it was clearly designed to counter or corrupt island magic, Kaelan's power. "Valerius was always a snake," Lyra spat, her mind racing. She had to buy Kaelan time to think. "And you, Vorlag, are his witless fang. Do you truly believe he'll share an iota of the anima maris power with a common pirate like you?" Vorlag chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "Oh, I have my own arrangements, Princess. This orb is more than just a tool, it's a key to siphoning its essence. Once I have drained the heart of this island, I will have no need for kings or their paltry bounties." His eyes glittered with a manic light. "But first, your compliance. Your merman friend seems unwell. Perhaps you care to assist him by surrendering." Kaelan gritted his teeth, his body trembling slightly as he fought the orb, oppressive influence. "Do not listen to him, Lyra," he gasped, his voice strained. "Protect the heart." Lyra's gaze met Kaelan's. In his pained eyes, she saw not fear, but a fierce, unwavering resolve. The visions from the anima maris, the feeling of its ancient life force, her grandmother's true intent, it all coalesced within her. This was no longer about a lost legacy to claim. It was about protecting a sacred life, a vital balance. "Never, Vorlag," she declared, her voice ringing with newfound conviction. She took a step forward, placing herself slightly in front of Kaelan. "This island, its heart, will not be your prize." "A pity," Vorlag sighed theatrically. "Then we do this the hard way. Men, secure the princess and subdue the guardian, gently if possible. I want him alive for study." The pirates surged forward. Lyra met the first wave, her dirk a desperate dance against their heavy cutlasses. She was quick, agile, her movements honed by years at sea, but she was one against many. Kaelan, though weakened, fought with the fury of a cornered storm, conjuring localized blasts of water and shards of rock, but each effort seemed to cost him dearly under the orb's oppressive aura. Vorlag watched, a cruel smile on his face, occasionally aiming the black orb to send another debilitating pulse towards Kaelan. Lyra knew they couldn't last long like this. They needed a miracle. And then she remembered the anima maris, its warmth, the images it had shown her, the feeling of a shared consciousness. "It shows what it wishes to whom it wishes," Kaelan had said. She closed her eyes for a fleeting second amidst the chaos of battle, not in prayer but in a desperate, focused appeal. "Anima maris, heart of the ocean, Ethel, hear me." We are your children fighting for you. Lend us your strength." As if in answer, a profound, resonant hum filled the air, originating not from Kaelan, but from the very ground beneath their feet, from the sky above, from the thundering sea. The anima maris, deep within its sanctum, pulsed with a brilliant, defiant light that seemed to momentarily push back against the clifftop darkness. A surge of invigorating energy flowed into Lyra, warm and powerful like the ocean's own embrace. Her weariness lessened, her senses sharpened. She felt a new intuitive connection to the island, a fleeting understanding of its intricate patterns of energy. Simultaneously, Kaelan roared, a sound of primal power, as a surge of turquoise light enveloped him, partially dispelling the orb's cloying darkness. He rose to his full height, his eyes blazing like twin aquamarines, the water around him now not just swirling but shaping itself into tendrils, lashing out like sentient whips. "What is this?" Vorlag snarled, his confidence wavering as the island itself seemed to awaken. "This pirate," Lyra cried, her voice imbued with a newfound authority as she disarmed a pirate with a move she hadn't known she possessed, "is Ethel's answer." The battle turned. Lyra, infused with the island's energy, moved with preternatural speed and grace, her dirk finding openings with uncanny accuracy. Kaelan, his power partially restored and amplified, became a force of nature, commanding waves to crash against the cliffs, dislodging boulders, and entangling pirates in animated seaweed that sprang from the cracks in the rock. The very air crackled with elemental fury. Vorlag, seeing his men falling back in disarray, shrieked in rage and focused the full power of his black orb on Kaelan. A concentrated beam of utter blackness shot forth. Lyra, seeing the danger, threw herself in front of Kaelan. She couldn't stop it, but she held aloft the only piece of her old life she still possessed, a small, silver locket her grandmother had given her, embossed with the ancient symbol of the Eldorian royal line, a symbol that supposedly resonated with sea magic. The dark beam struck the locket. Instead of shattering it, the silver glowed with an intense white light, the ancient symbol flaring. The dark energy seemed to recoil, a part of it even reflecting back towards Vorlag. The pirate captain screamed as the reflected energy struck his orb, causing it to crack and sputter erratically. "No, impossible!" Vorlag shrieked as the orb in his hand began to pulse violently, black lightning arcing from its fractured surface. Kaelan seized the moment. With a mighty roar, he summoned a colossal rogue wave from the churning sea below. It surged up the cliff face, an impossible wall of water, and crashed down upon Vorlag and his remaining men. The wave was not merely water, it was imbued with the island's ancient protective magic, and the pirates were swept away like driftwood, their cries swallowed by the returning sea. Vorlag, his cracked orb exploding in a shower of black shards, vanished into the roiling foam. When the waters receded, Lyra and Kaelan stood alone on the clifftop, bruised, battered, but victorious. The dissonant hum was gone. Ethel was quiet once more, the anima mari's steady, harmonious pulse slowly reasserting itself, though weaker now, tired. Lyra's locket lay on the ground, its silver tarnished but intact, the symbol still faintly warm. Kaelan gently picked it up, his expression one of awe. "Your grandmother chose her gift well, Lyra of the Sea. It seems the blood of the true guardian still flows in Eldoria." Lyra looked at him, a deep, unspoken understanding passing between them. The battle had forged a bond far stronger than circumstance. "The anima maris," it answered me. "It recognized one who sought to protect, not to possess," Kaelan said, his voice soft. He looked out at the turbulent ocean, then back at her. "Vorlag is gone, for now, but your uncle he will not give up so easily." Lyra nodded, a weary resolve settling upon her. "No, he won't, which means Ethel will never truly be safe as long as its secret is known to men like him." She looked at the path leading back towards the island's heart. "The tidestone, the anima maris, it must remain here, protected. My quest was never to take it, Kaelan, I see that now. It was to understand it, to ensure it remains a source of balance, not of conflict." A faint smile touched Kaelan's lips, the first genuine smile Lyra had seen from him. It transformed his stern features, revealing a warmth that mirrored the ocean's depths. "You speak like a true guardian, Captain." In the days that followed, as the island slowly healed, so too did the connection between Lyra and Kaelan. They worked together, Kaelan showing her the secret ways of Ethel, its vulnerabilities, its strengths. Lyra in turn shared her knowledge of the outside world, of the threats that might still come. Miraculously, a few of Lyra's crew, including a battered but alive Finn, were found washed ashore in a secluded cove, having survived the wreck in Vorlag's brief, chaotic presence. They too were awed by Ethel and pledged their loyalty to its protection under their captain. Lyra knew she could not stay hidden on Ethel forever, nor could she simply abandon her crew or the world beyond. But her path had changed. She would no longer seek the Tidestone as a prize. Instead, with her loyal crew and her ship, which Kaelan with the island's magic helped them painstakingly repair and even enhance with living wood that hummed with Ethel's energy, she would become its shield in the outer world. She would be the guardian of Ethel's secret, the protector of its shores, turning her pirate skills to a nobler cause. On the day the Star Chaser, now subtly changed, more alive, was ready to sail, Lyra stood on the beach with Kaelan. The unspoken emotions between them were as vast and deep as the ocean itself. "You will return?" Kaelan asked, his voice carefully neutral, though his aquamarine eyes held a universe of longing. Lyra reached out, her fingers gently tracing the pattern of scales on his arm. "Ethel is a part of me now, Kaelan, as you are." She leaned in and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to his lips, a promise of tides that would always bring her back. "I will always return to protect my heart's home." He held her gaze, his own softening with a love that mirrored the ocean's endless embrace. "And the sea will always guide you back to me, Lyra, princess of the tides, guardian of Ethel's hope." As the Star Chaser sailed away from the mist-shrouded island, Lyra stood at the helm, no longer just a pirate captain or a renegade princess, but something more. She was a protector, her destiny now interwoven with the ancient magic of the sea and the merman who guarded its soul. The adventure was far from over, but now she sailed not for a lost legacy, but for a living one, with hope as her compass and love as her truest north.